NASCAR's inaugural street race in Chicago goes to Gisbergen in his first ever NASCAR Cup Series start in an absolutely incredible finish. Let's talk about NASCAR on the streets of Chicago. Hello everybody, welcome to Dirty Air. I'm your host Alex Lambert, and let's talk about NASCAR's inaugural Chicago street race, and what a race it was. Absolutely fantastic finish. Shane Van Gisbergen able to get by Justin Haley, really fly by everybody there at the end of this race. We'll break down the incredible talent, the incredible road racing talent we saw from him tonight. The playoff leaderboard continues to heat up as Alex Bowman had a bad day, Ty Gibbs had a good day, Bubba Wallace had a bad day. We'll break all that down. We'll look at the point standings, and of course we'll go through the top 10 and kind of see where everybody stacked up following the first ever street race in NASCAR, and it was definitely a success. The day started out under cloudy skies, under rainy skies, downpour, big storms coming through the Chicago area. It unfortunately ended the Xfinity race early. NASCAR had to delay the Cup race tonight. Luckily, the big storm, the washout we had in Chicago, just kind of cleared up in the afternoon, and we were able to get this race underway. Started out under the rain tires. It was fun to see the track dry out. You saw the groove they were racing on start to dry out. But as the race started to narrow down, we have a couple of big key moments that we have to break down. Obviously, that is the point where NASCAR shortened the race by 25 laps, shortened the race by an entire quarter from 100 laps to 75 laps. That was a really key moment in this race, and of course we'll talk about how fast Gisbergen was, because he was on fire at the end of this race, went by a bunch of drivers, and let's go ahead and break it all down. We'll start out with Shane Van Gisbergen, because absolutely incredible run to the finish. We were talking about him all weekend, how he was so fast. Qualified in the third position, coming onto pit road early on in the race, got tagged by behind and spun around, lost a lot of track position on that situation, in that unfortunate situation for him. But man, the talent he was able to show was impressive. The way he was able to, from the first practice session, learn the race car, learn the racetrack, learn what to do with this big heavy stock car, which he's somewhat used to racing. Those supercars. He's like a world champion, an exceptionally talented driver at these types of racetracks. And what we saw, what he was doing with his feet, hitting the clutch, hitting the gas, brakes, knowing exactly when to do it. He learned that race course, and he felt at home. You could tell by the way he was talking on the radio. He felt comfortable the entire race, and I think it was exceptionally impressive that he was able to go out there and beat all these NASCAR Cup drivers. NASCAR is one of the hardest motorsports in the world. We know that. We've seen drivers come from all sorts of other racing series. We've seen drivers come from IndyCar, Formula One, and struggle. And Gisbergen was able to come out here and win his first race. That's like some Mario Andretti stuff, when Mario came out and won the Daytona 500 back in the 60s. That's what I thought of when Gisbergen won this race. Absolutely incredible moment for him and for NASCAR for sure. We talked to him after the race. NBC talked to him after the race. He said that he definitely wants to come back in NASCAR, maybe not next year, but the following year after that. Going to be exciting to see if he does come back, and if he's able to come back and potentially win some more races. Just absolutely insane, incredible what he was able to do. Like I said, the footwork from practice, qualifying third, all weekend long, what he did was phenomenal, and it's exciting. And it's exciting to think that he could be coming back in the future. Definitely excited to see what he can do, and everybody's learning him. A lot of people didn't know how to say his name this morning. Everybody knows his name now, especially in the NASCAR community after the big win today. So let's go ahead and break down one of the big key moments in the race. And I'm going to call the drivers affected by this the big three, because these were the three drivers that were going for the win until a very key moment in the race. And that was about, I want to say it was a little bit before lap 50, lap 40-something of the race. NASCAR decided that with the sun setting, how long it was taking to do the race, they were going to shorten the race from 100 laps down to 75 laps. That's a pretty big decrease. That put the race in a 1 fuel mileage race. That means you could make it on fuel for a lot of drivers, except for the leaders, except for the drivers that stayed out. That was Christopher Bell, Tyler Reddick, and Kyle Larson. Those are the big three I'm referring to, because they were so fast all day long. You had Christopher Bell lead the most laps, absolutely dominate the first portion of this race. You had Tyler Reddick really sitting in second or third most of the race, and then Kyle Larson, a charging Kyle Larson, trying to get by Christopher Bell at the end. They were building really big storylines, and when NASCAR made that call, I don't know. I think NASCAR had to shorten the race. Obviously, if this race was 25 laps longer, we would have never gotten to the end. We were not going to run 100 laps in this race. I'm glad NASCAR decided to do it early. Maybe they should have tried to communicate, and obviously I didn't listen to the radio. I don't know everything they said, but I would like to see a little bit more communication with the teams. It's really unfortunate for guys like Christopher Bell, who actually ended up wrecking getting in the mid-pack. He should have been out front. If they'd have known the race was going to be a quarter shorter than a scheduled distance, obviously the strategy would have been different. So it was an advantage for a lot of guys. It was fortunate for a lot of guys, but misfortunate for those three drivers I named. And then, of course, you had Tyler Reddick actually come back up through the field. He was putting the pressure on Justin Haley at the end of this race. Justin Haley was doing a great job trying to hold off everybody, and then Tyler Reddick wrecks himself. And then Austin Dillon's trying to run down Justin Haley, and he wrecks himself. And then, like I said, Christopher Bell wrecked himself, and then Kyle Larson was able to come back. He was so fast, able to get a solid fourth-place finish. So those were kind of a breakdown of the big three. But let's go ahead and take a look at the top 10. Let's take a look at the finishing results. Obviously, like I said, Gisbergen able to finish first in the 91 Chevrolet for Trackhouse. Exceptionally talented win. Really good for Trackhouse. They have 2 wins in a row now. Remember, Ross Chastain won a week ago in Nashville. Justin Haley, like I said, did a great job holding off everybody. He did all he could do in that race car. It had much worn tires. We didn't even know if he was going to get to the end of the race on fuel. It was not looking good for Justin Haley. He had Austin Dillon on his rear bumper, didn't let the pressure get to him, never gave up the lead. Same thing with Tyler Reddick, never gave up the lead for any of those moments until Gisbergen just blew his doors off at the end of this thing. And really, Haley never made a mistake. He even tried to race it so hard, he got backed by Gisbergen for one corner, which I think was impressive, but he obviously didn't have the fast enough race car, much older tires. He took what he had and did everything he could with it. And shoot, I think it might be impressive that he was able to finish second without giving up a spot to Chase Elliott. And that brings us to Chase Elliott. Once again, another driver that we see him as a talented road course driver. 7 road course wins in his career. Wasn't quite able to get it done today. He's been showing a lot more speed lately. Going for wins is what Chase Elliott has already said that he wants to do. In all his post-race interviews, can he mathematically point his way into the playoffs? Yes, but even if you do point your way into the playoffs, you're not going to have any stage point, or you're not going to have any playoff points for the win. If you're Chase Elliott in the 9 team, wins is key. If you make it in the playoff with 1 or 2 or 0 playoff points, you're going to be at a major disadvantage each round of the playoffs. Wins is key right now for Chase Elliott. I know he's going for wins. He's got 8 more races to do so to jump him up into the NASCAR playoffs. Kyle Larson was able to salvage a 4th place finish. One of those big 3 drivers I talked about, really fast. I think if Kyle Larson maybe had some more laps on him, or had some more laps in the race, maybe he would have had something where he could have at least finished second. Unfortunate what happened to Kyle Larson there. Same incident where the race was shortened. Really put Kyle Larson in a rough spot. You have Kyle Busch was able to come back to finish 5th after slamming into the tire barrier early on in the race. I think it was on lap 3. Had to get pulled out from under the tire barrier. He said the car was fine. He thinks he could continue racing. Obviously, that was the case. He definitely wasn't the fastest car today, but was able to salvage another top 5 finish, and that's a few top 10s in a row for Kyle Busch. He's been very consistent throughout this summer portion, which, if you remember a year ago, is when he fell off, was in the summer portion. So it's good to see Kyle Busch consistently running in the top 10 week in and week out. It's a lot of fun to watch. Hopefully, you can get that 4th win coming up. That'd be great to see next week in Atlanta. Austin Cindric, a nice 6th place finish. He's really struggled. You talk about a sophomore slump. The definition of that is Austin Cindric this season, but was able to salvage a 6th place finish today. You have Michael McDowell racing to get into the playoffs. 10 points below the playoff cut line now. Had an incredible day. Able to get a solid 7th place finish. Michael McDowell, like he said in his post-race interview, the top 10s are starting to add up, and he could make the NASCAR playoffs. Depending on what happens, a whole lot of stuff could happen in these NASCAR playoffs, but Michael McDowell right now is doing a fantastic job managing everything and getting the best results he can. Same thing goes to Joey Logano. He got his win back in Atlanta, so he's in the playoffs, but Joey Logano is one of those drivers, and I can relate this to Kevin Harvick this season as well, where his cars and the Fords are not that fast this season. They are definitely at a major disadvantage right now. Logano's not competing for wins. Kevin Harvick's not really competing for wins. He's come close a few times, like in Phoenix he did really well. But they're taking these race cars that are probably not top 10 race cars and finishing in the top 10. Crew chiefs for these teams as well are doing the same thing. Very impressive that they're able to take these cars that are really at a disadvantage, these Fords that are at a disadvantage and finish in the top every single week. Logano's been in the top 10 a lot lately. He's not been a top 10 car, maybe not even a top 15 car whatsoever at all this season. He's at a major disadvantage, but once again is in the top 10. So it's good to see Joey Logano continue to do that. You have Ty Gibbs finishing in the 9th position, another one of those drivers on the playoff cut line, now 6 points above the playoffs. So he is now in the NASCAR playoffs if it ended today, and we're going to break that down a little bit more in just a moment. Chris Buescher, another one of those drivers in the top 10. He looks like he's most likely going to be in the NASCAR playoffs this upcoming season, or this season. And with that being said, let's talk about the playoff grid. Here it is. William Byron, 3 wins on the year. Kyle Busch, 3 wins on the year. Obviously, those two continue to lead the playoff leaderboard. William Byron had a rough day today. Kyle Busch obviously ended up finishing in the 5th position. But let's take a look at more of the cut line itself, the drivers in green. And I want to kind of break this down because every driver in gold obviously is guaranteed in the playoffs. Obviously, Gisbergen winning today is like a sign of relief for guys like Ty Gibbs and Bubba Wallace because that didn't have a new winner. If Justin Haley had a won, that would have moved the cut line up. But once again, look at the races coming up. We got Atlanta. We got some road courses. Daytona to end out the regular season could get a surprise winner. So let's break this down. The winners in gold are the ones that are guaranteed in the NASCAR playoffs this season. The ones in green are not guaranteed in, but I can go ahead and tell you Kevin Harvick, Chris Buescher, Brad Keselowski are most likely going to be in. The only exception that they're not going to be in is if we get 3 different winners that are all below the cut line. I don't see us having 3 different winners to knock one of those 3 out if it's not one of those 3, because of the speed they've shown this year, those 3 deserve to be in the playoffs. Harvick is definitely guaranteed in. He's almost 50 points ahead of Chris Buescher, and then you have Chris Buescher, Brad Keselowski. They're definitely not going to miss it on points. The only concern would be if we get a couple of surprise winners, and we'd have to get 3 of those, which is possible. The real battle is going to be between Bubba Wallace and Ty Gibbs, especially because going to Daytona, going to Atlanta, going to road courses, that surprise winner. Chase Elliott could go out there and win a race. That moves that cut line up. That's definitely a concern for those guys. So with that 9-point difference, you want to be 15th on the playoff grid at all times to guarantee your spot into the playoffs. Even when it goes all the way down to Daytona, whoever's in 15th and 16th, that's the battle we're really going to want to be watching, because you can always get that surprise winner every racetrack we go to this season. You have Daniel Suarez, didn't have an extremely good day, was running in the top 10, definitely should have got a better finish, made a bunch of mistakes, run into the wall a bunch of times, and ended up, he's now minus 6 points below the cut line. Like I said, Ty Gibbs had a great day. He's now 6 points above the cut line. Once again, Ty Gibbs is continuing to prove that he's a good race car driver, finishing in the top 10 again today, solid 9th place finish. Even if Ty Gibbs misses the playoffs, he's already had an exceptionally incredible rookie season. I wouldn't even count Ty Gibbs out for getting a win this season. You have Michael McDowell, like I said, another one of those drivers in the top 10. He's only 10 points outside the playoffs right now. Michael McDowell's never pointed his way in the playoffs. It's definitely possible. He made it in 2021, obviously, with that Daytona 500 win. Missed it last year. Michael McDowell is definitely a threat to make the NASCAR playoffs this season. With the road course races coming up, I wouldn't be surprised if he was able to get a win. He's definitely one of those drivers that could get it done. AJ Allmendinger, a little bit disappointing today. They didn't finish better. As 24 points below the cut line right now. Definitely want to improve on these road course races, and he's got to be somewhat consistent at these ovals, which he lacked at the beginning of the year if he wants to make it in. Alex Bowman, an absolutely disastrous day. Got turned around multiple times and then ended up with the engine failure. I'm assuming it was some kind of mechanical failure, potentially an engine blowing up on the racetrack. They raised the hood. Car was smoking. It was done. It was a done day. I want to say Alex Bowman finished, if not dead last, very close to dead last. So an awful day for Alex Bowman. He was 2 points out going into the cut on the cut line going into today. Now he's 26 points out. A massive failure, a massive disastrous day for Alex Bowman in the 48 car. And this was a guy that at one point this season, it's really honestly, it's kind of disappointing to look at. He was leading the regular season points at one point this NASCAR season, and now he might not even make the NASCAR playoffs because of missing races due to injury. And then, of course, just the last few weeks, it's just not been consistent at all like he was early this season. But that's really all there is to talk about. We do have to go to Atlanta next week, which I think is going to be exciting. Another Sunday night race. This will be kind of 3 Sunday night races in a row. This one was pushed a little late due to weather. Last week was at night, and then, of course, Atlanta will be at night. A few interesting things you want to look at. Once again, look at some of those drivers below the cut line. I want to look at Corey LaJoie, who's been fast in Atlanta lately. Look at Justin Haley, who was fast today. Those two guys could go out there and get a win. Look at last year's July winner at Atlanta. Chase Elliott, also last year's Talladega winner, a similar racetrack now. Those drivers, it's going to be an intense race. The drivers are going to have a lot more grip at Atlanta this year than they did last year in the heat, in the summertime. It was like 90-something degrees in Georgia. It'll be at night. The sun will set. The track will change. Once again, we'll be looking at that. I think it should be exciting, and I hope everybody enjoys it next week. And, of course, like and subscribe if you like the video. Tune in next week and share the video if you'd like somebody else to see it. I do really appreciate it. But that's it. That's all there is to talk about after the Chicago street race. And, of course, about Kyle Busch finishing 5th. Let's get rowdy.